think we'll get started. It's 6:01. Welcome, everyone. Happy New Year. Welcome back.
New Year.
And we're going to start off. Tom, why don't you talk first before we get into the actual program?
Hi, I'm Tom Mullen. I'm the town council for the town of Wakefield. I was making my introductions before, and I don't think I know.
I'm Shane McCarthy.
Hi, Shane.
Yep, nice to meet you.
Cable
I've seen you at
advisor.
many of the town meetings.
So I'm here, I guess, because of the provision in your agenda of a legal review dealing with the use of space at the high school and Verizon cable contract.
Right.
I can pretty quickly summarize my thoughts about both, which are that if you're going to have space at the new high school, we need to have a lease, and that lease agreement has to be signed off on by the Commissioner of Education at the state level. This is the process that's required by Chapter 40, Section 3, and which we went through in connection with this area here.
In 2000.
Second, with respect to.
By the way,
Verizon-
don't get, I'm gonna ask you a question. It'll be fine.
If we have an agreement related to leasing facilities, and we also have other elements of an agreement with respect to some of the costs that are going to be incurred related to transition, things along those lines. Does it get characterized as a general contract, or because there's a specific lease provision in there, does that require the sign off by the education lease commission?
The only reason that you need the Commissioner of Education's approval is because we are leasing a portion of a school building in actual use as such. That's the language of the statute.
Okay,
So to the extent we're dealing with anything else, we don't need his.
okay. All right, thank you.
And I think one of the things that we needed to state to the MSBA, the School Building Authority, was that the space for WCAT and any other non-educational spot was less than 10%.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty easy.
Given the size of that
Given
thing
the
over
size
there.
But that also included any space for the savings bank branch too. So good.
And then with respect to the second matter, the Verizon cable contract, we of course I've been fairly recently dealing with Attorney John Harrington, a Wakefield resident who represents Verizon in connection with cable renewals in various towns, because I represent some other towns as well. And I can tell you that Verizon doesn't give anybody more than a 5-year contract, which is what we have now. We've got a contract from 22 to 27. And they insist on an early out because it's by no means clear to them that they want to stay in this business. And so our provision under section 2.4 says, notwithstanding any provision herein to the contrary, licensee may terminate this license upon 180 days written notice to the issuing authority. Licensee shall not provide the notice of termination sooner than the beginning of the 31st month following the effective date. So this basically gives us 30 months plus 180 days insurance under this current license.
Which I believe that time period has passed. That they have the ability at this point, if in fact we do confirm that the 30 months notice that period has passed, then I believe the conclusion is that they could give us a 180-day notice at any time going forward for the remainder of the contract and exit the contract.
Well, Verizon has talked for years about getting out of cable altogether. So it's been hanging out there for at least a decade and a half. Because we were arguing this with them back when I was on the board. Tom and I and others had to appear before the Senate and House in Boston to testify to the value of access at the time.
So I think the reason this came up is because the financial projections that we've been showing going out for 3 years assumes that Comcast, Verizon, and RCN will continue to provide service and continue to provide franchise fees.
Right.
So this is very helpful to know that I'm not suggesting we change the forecast because we have no information that shows that would be appropriate at this time, but it is something I think we have to bear in mind
Right.
as we go forward.
Right. Tom, anything else?
No, I'm happy to try to answer questions, but that's no.
Questions from anyone?
Try to talk a little bit about the playing field argument. This person's aware of that.
Yeah, there is this concept, which I know, I believe you're all familiar with in cable licensing of a level playing field. Basically, that if you give a concession to one licensee, you have to give similar concessions to the others. And it's of particular salience in Wakefield because while a lot of towns, some towns, I guess, have just one licensee, we for a very long time now have had 3.
Tom, on a matter that's tangential to this, if there's one of these contracts where we would like to look into being able to change it, what would be the likelihood of the process of
You mean before it expires?
that before it expires? Yeah.
Well, we could always bring that up with the licensee. I guess I have not found them difficult to deal with.
Okay.
On the other hand, I haven't had occasion to ask them for anything that's very difficult for them. I think the big challenge for us is going to be this level playing field concept. To be prepared to run into the obstacle that if we ask for X from this guy and he's going to seek some kind of compensation, we're going to end up getting a request for such compensation from the other guys as well.
How recent is the level playing field concept? Because I don't remember that being in play. Back, I was on the board and associated with WCAT until 2012. I don't recall that ever happening in the negotiations, and we went through 3 sets of negotiations during my term as president.
Oh, it's not recent by any means.
Okay, it didn't come up in the negotiations, which is why I was wondering. So maybe it wasn't as important then as it is.
So one of the questions that I have is right now, we have 4.5 and there's a maximum of 5. What would be the likelihood that we would be able to ask, assuming the town would be willing to try to push the 2 coming up in 27 to 5, given that RCN is a 10-year contract and the renewable until 20.
So this 5 you're referring to is the 5% franchise fee,
Yes.
where the current contract show 4.5%,
Right.
and the Cable Act does allow up to 5%.
Which is what WCAT had for a long, long time from all the providers.
I'll be happy to try to negotiate any such provision that you want me to seek. We probably never had less bargaining power. I can tell from my gray hair, I'm to remember the days when any company looking to do cable would promise you absolutely anything in the world. They wouldn't necessarily provide it up front, but they promise it because it was a license to print money.
So I remember the first time when RCN first came in, their generous offer was what allowed this place to be built out. Back in
1999 is when we were forced out of, when WCAT was forced out of the school.
Yeah.
Into the Montrose School for a year. And 2000 is when the deal was finally struck for this space. This was shop space.
Yeah, and our RCN had a 300,000 donation, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah,
That was what had built out this space, at least that's what my records show.
yeah. No, that's true.
So yes, I completely understand what you're saying. One of the things that I wanted to look at was in the RCN contract, which is a 10-year contract. In the most recent one, we were given HD channels. And it looks like there was money taken off of our franchise for that. Given our situation, we find that it would be beneficial for us to give them back and get that back. But I don't know. What percentage what is. So something was one of the few, other than trying to get the up to the maximum 5%. I was wondering if you want to, but I found really good to get rid of it.
But based on the most recent Verizon contract negotiations, if we were to go forward and say, we would really like you to pay a 5% franchise fee, increasing it from 4.5% to 5%. Clearly, there would have to be something in return that they would send them. Has there been something that they've been asking for that that's come up in previous negotiations that we should expect them to ask for in return that maybe, do you recall anything like that?
No, what I recall more is an insistence by them on the right to exit quickly.
Mhm.
And so it's really a matter of our getting the best deal that we could get them to put on the table. Yeah, it's not like we have a lot to negotiate with. So if we were going to seek higher amount of money, I think the only thing that I could propose would be to let you out earlier. And that's kind of self-defeating.
Streaming has changed the whole landscape of television delivery. And it's changed. Cable, as we know it, doesn't have the power that it did even 5 years ago. Now, having said that, streaming is also starting to sputter. So what comes next, nobody knows. You know, within the industry, we're all kind of, those of us who are into production are looking at it, what's going to happen, but because they're all starting to eat each other and conglomerate large ways. Hulu just went over to Disney, was it? Yeah. Before Christmas.
And the reason I asked about Verizon is because it was the most recent one, but the provision that Ian's referring to also exists in the Comcast contract. We've done some rough calculations that if both of those contracts were increased from 4.5% to 5%, the dollar value that would be increase in franchise fees coming to WCAT would be in the $30,000 to $35,000 amount for each per year. So it's not insignificant, but going to the franchise, the cable company, so we'd like you to pay more. It's usually going to be something. I don't know, Comcast doesn't seem to have been interested in any kind of out provision that I'm aware of. Are you?
No.
Okay.
Comcast hasn't elicited anything publicly that they're planning to get out of cable, unlike Verizon.
Mhm.
Tom, is 4.5 and then kind of what you see in the other communities? If we had 5 and now we're 4.5, then we somehow lose a half when nobody else did? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be pretty aggressive demand. Demand is the wrong word, a pretty aggressive request to go to 5%. So Again, I'll ask for whatever you want me to ask for, but I don't want to give you false hope.
Appreciate that.
That's the one thing that we do know. It's easy to go down, but harder to
Right.
go back up.
Okay, but to be fair, that request would have to come from the board at WCAT and not from this organization.
We're not a party to the contract.
No, no,
That
no.
would actually have to come from the town
That's
council.
all.
The town of Wakefield.
Yes, but
Right.
communicating with you would be the WCAT Board of Directors, not this group.
I don't see why this group, as it puts its findings together, couldn't make that a recommendation for future contracts. Frankly,
That could be a finding of ours, but in the past, it's always been the board, WCAT board that has been directly responsible for those sorts of things.
Well, I know the board would be happy to recommend that.
I couldn't
That's the case.
why, you know?
I'm sure we'll get the unanimous vote on that.
All right, anything else for Tom? Okay. Try and speed through this meeting tonight because Steve has to leave early.
you maybe have.
You're off the hook, Tom. That's why I wanted to get to the first and get you in and out, so you didn't have to sit here and listen to the rest of us drone on.
I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, Doug.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Tom. Have a great evening.
You too.
Okay, and as I say, you know, we are going to be kind of speeding through this a little bit tonight. Although we do have some things. Paul, audited financial statements of fiscal year 24 through 27.
So the audited financial statements are part of the Govenda database because at our last meeting, the audit had not been finalized. The numbers that were presented in that meeting that were being used for some of the analysis of our fund balances for the next 3 years did not change. So this was just a matter of getting the formal audited financial statements and footnotes into the database. So that's the reason that was part of our data set for tonight. At our last meeting, we talked about our 3-year projection and our budget that was approved. And in this, we were showing that we'd be in a position for the next 3 years. It didn't seem like we had a funding crisis. And one of the things that we committed to is to do a mid-year review of how the actuals are comparing to the budget, so that if in fact we see some trends that may change the date in which funding might be more critical, that was something we were aware of. So we did the mid-year review. That's what the document, the second document is showing, a new column called the fiscal 2025 forecast. There are only 2 things that are changing there. First of all, through November, we are running ahead of our budget, which is our loss is less than our budgeted loss, which is good news. We anticipate that trend will continue primarily due to the issue we've talked about in the past, which is the health insurance budgeted expense line item, where we have no employees that are incurring that are receiving health insurance benefits. We've talked about that being a $25,000 budget item.
Right.
We don't anticipate that we'll be spending that $25,000. So the line item that shows insurance has been reduced by $25,000 from the budget in coming up with the forecast.
Okay, that's for this year.
Yes.
For fiscal 25, what we wanted to make sure is that, here's our budget,
Yeah.
which we talked about last time.
Yeah.
And we didn't want to come back here 12 months and say, we totally blew our budget. Wanted to keep people focused on. But you're right. The future years do show a 12-month health insurance costs. So you see that line for insurance jumping up in 26 and 27, because we fully expect that we will be paying health insurance for our employees. But
Okay.
for this year, that's not the case.
All right, and the reason for that jump is?
2 of the 3 will age out of their parents' health insurance.
All right.
And
So
then
it's
the
not that
following
somebody's
year,
just
the third
all of a
one will
sudden-
Also.
Okay, all right.
The only other change that we have in the forecast compared to our budget is we were fortunate to receive a $2,000 grant from the Cummings Foundation.
Mhm.
We did ask for permission to apply for their more robust grant program.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, our request to apply was denied.
Mhm.
So we don't have any reason to believe that the grant income will be more than the $2,000 that we've received.
Mhm.
So when you put those two things together, $25,000 expense decrease, $2,000 of grant income, and our franchise fees are a little higher than what was forecast, you see that we now are forecasting a slight profit.
Mhm.
So that's good news. Last year we had a slight profit. This year we're expecting a slight profit. The numbers aren't big enough to change the big picture that by the time we get to fiscal 27, fiscal 28, we are probably going to have to look at alternative methods to address the issue,
Mhm.
but it has not become a critical issue to address in the very near term.
Yeah, I would just say that those 2 years, both of those profits were because of one-time shots that we had.
Okay.
One was a very large reduction in employee
Mhm.
expense, and then of course the other one is the other insurance.
You might have more on the investment income as well, because I know we talked last time that it was cut so much because rates were coming down, but rates aren't coming down as fast as everyone anticipated, so that might boost it up a little too.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Anyone else?
If I could.
Yeah.
So we are assuming on the franchise fee income, we're assuming a 3% decrease. So, which is luckily that hasn't come to fruition in the last few years. I wonder with the building of a lot of units coming on, actual building of units, we have Head of the Lake is going to come on, the one on Hopkins Street and some other projects that will, shuffle. If we can, I don't think it's changing forecast, but I
Mhm.
think your pool of houses that
It's possible.
that have cable, could
Yeah.
help out a little, because I still think people are still getting cable,
We need the
But
Walmart
not
cable,
in the
like,
same numbers that they
basic
used to.
package,
but it's not
what we
decreasing.
live complex.
Yeah, most of them,
Does that
most of them will come in, and those larger ones will have that. And usually the negotiations one,
Yeah, I was
One
gonna say, it's
provider,
usually
one
one
provider.
or the other.
So they'll sign with Comcast.
Or
they'll
whoever,
Sign
yeah.
with Verizon,
probably not ours yet.
or whatever their name du jour is.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting what.
Well, is the fact that
Astounding.
we're currently ahead on the franchise fees over what was estimated. Perhaps an indication that there is a little growth.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's likely to be the case in sort of looking out for fiscal 26 and 27. Kevin or I did look at the prior 5-year trend, and it has been better the past couple of years than it was about 3 or 4 years ago. But to be conservative and to we thought that a 3% decline made
Mhm.
sense, but it
Mhm.
is a potential area.
Mhm.
I think if you difference between a 1% and 3% decline is probably not too much.
Mhm.
Our big issue is going to be the $260,000 that we have estimated that will be paid to the high school move. And what do we do from there?
Mhm.
Because that will also decrease our building interest.
Correct.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. Anyone else? I think we've gone over financial parameters of the current cable contracts. Does everyone agree with that? Okay.
I do think, and I'll talk to Tom about this and talk to the council. There are other items in the contract that are financial payments, the capital program.
Yeah.
For one, I don't think we want to trade that. So I
No,
think we're gonna keep that in mind, Yeah, we'll increase the franchise, we'll increase the pass-through.
right.
And it won't give you as much over here, because the pass-through doesn't cost them. Technically. So,
There is one thing I wanted to call everyone's attention to with respect to the Verizon contract compared to the Comcast contract.
Mhm.
I am almost certain that where the Comcast contract says that the franchise fees shall be subsequently reallocated or paid to 2/3 to WCAT
Mhm,
and 1/3 to the school.
mhm.
I'm almost certain that the Verizon contract does not specify that. It's been our practice, continues to be our practice.
Right,
And if in fact, if it were up to me, I would prefer that the Comcast contract conform with the Verizon contract, which gives the town some flexibility on how they want to allocate franchise fees.
okay.
Because right now, like I said, Verizon does not specify a 2/3, 1/3 payment.
Would that be advantageous to WCAT?
Only if the town council decided they weren't going to pay 1/3 to the school. That would be very good. But,
Or what if a council went the other way? I'm just saying.
That is also a possibility.
Right, that's right.
It absolutely is, which is
Very much.
why I was raising the question.
Yeah, I think that that's certainly a possibility, but I think that having the town council have some flexibility to determine where the funds are needed and to allocate them accordingly
Right.
is would be beneficial. That's just one of the things I think you'll see in those contracts.
Okay. All right, anyone else on financial parameters? Okay, legislative update, the legislative update right now is that, of course, at midnight on December 31st, the streaming bill from last year died again for the third time. I have been in discussions with Donald Wong since November, and pending the final votes on who's going to be leading the House of Representatives and the Senate at the state level, Donald and I will be meeting with those leaders to start putting together a new streaming bill and going around the folks who brought it up the last time, because it's been 3 up and 3 down. So I will hopefully have an update on that at the next meeting, but that's what we're doing now. We're skipping the previous way it's been handled and just dealing directly with the Senate and the House leadership. And hopefully we can get some traction this time, because you know, it's been suggested and then ignored. Approval of, yeah, go ahead.
It's my understanding and estimation, and somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, but even if we have the most favorable outcome of that,
Yes,
its implementation and return to us is still 3 years away.
not
Ideally.
clear. Not clear. Depends on how the legislation is built. Okay, and the reaction of the providers, because the providers are very much against having to pay anything on anything. But in the meantime, they're racking up a lot of money. So, approval of minutes, anything on the minutes?
So one thing I just want to raise a minor point.
Yeah,
The last sentence in the financial review section says, it was also noted that franchise fee revenue could be transferred from operating costs to capital expenditures per WCAT auditors. The general point is that we have the ability to move operating fund balances
mhm,
to capital fund balances
mhm,
to address any needs in those areas.
mhm.
Not necessarily recharacterize franchise fee revenue that it's operating. So I think that sentence would just be improved by saying that it was noted that operating fund balances
Mhm.
or capital fund balances could be transferred to address operating or capital needs as required, something along those lines.
Mhm.
Except the capital can't be transferred to operating.
Actually, you're right about that in one of the other contracts. So those just say that it's noted that, and where we have the excesses on operating. So
Wouldn't it be better to follow whatever the most restrictive terms of one of the contracts is and not muddy the waters? If one of the
better-
contracts says you can't move it from X to Y, and the other two say it's okay, wouldn't it be better from an organizational point of view just to go with the most restrictive?
Well, that's what we're doing. So the-
Okay,
everything is kind of by omission.
okay,
The only limitation that we have found in the contracts is that they say capital cannot be used to run the station. It can only be used for purchasing of equipment.
right. So that's always been the case.
So that's the only thing that we,
Yeah.
as I understand, as I've read it, is the only thing that is
Yeah.
restricted.
But that's always been the case.
But yeah, operating can go to capital.
Right,
So
if
operating,
needed.
operating fund balances could be transferred to capital fund balances to
Not the
address,
other way.
to address needs.
To address shortfalls.
Yeah.
Address shortfalls.
Yeah,
Okay.
capital
Okay.
fund shortfalls.
I'll change that last
Because
sentence.
realistically, you're only supposed to do it if you just.
Yeah.
Approval of minutes. Anyone have any problem with the minutes of the last meeting
As amended.
as amended?
Move to accept the minutes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in
As
favor?
amended.
Opposed? Thank you. We've covered legal review. Now group member comments. Usually I wait until last, but this meeting I'm going to jump ahead. I took the liberty yesterday of writing up some thoughts on where we could go with this thing. We're not going to review it tonight because there's too much to read, and you know, I'm cognizant of Steve's schedule tonight. But I would like this to be on the agenda for the next meeting to discuss. But the purpose for this is to try and come up with something that we can propose as a committee as a way of ensuring WCAT survival, but also the service to the town and to the town's people. So this is just my thoughts. And we can go from there, but I would appreciate if everyone would be able to discuss this next meeting, and in fact, we might make this the sole item, since we really pretty much, we've exhausted WCAT financials, right? Pretty much. for the time being.
We're good for another 6 months as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, all right. So for the next
That's a
meeting.
good time frame.
That's why I chose it.
The next meeting is after April 13th.
Let me go around the table before we go to the next agenda item. Ian? No? Brian?
Brian did give something regarding the sports coverage. Did you want to talk about that? It's in Govenda.
Yeah, I'll just talk about it real quickly. So we have good activity in the sports area. Ian and the board have been able to get some funds set aside to pay some of the interns at minimum wage, which is great. Viewership is good, not live streaming as much, but we will do that. But you know, we're doing a fair job there. But more importantly, we've got 2 or 3 kids that are actively involved in learning not only camera work and some of the other technical parts of it, but they're also doing the commentary and color presentations as well too. So, it's good support, I think. For this. Thanks.
Mike?
Do we have a cost? Can I ask?
Yeah, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is there a cost attached to that? Because I know that you have the views and everything, which is great, but I think. you guys-
I guess the cost would really, the only cost to that is Brian's time and money.
It might be nice to know that. Because there's a service that's being you know, it's part of my cost.
Could
We
you
could
put
break
numbers
that up.
together as to how much it costs in personnel and equipment to do any of the sports or anything else, including setup and takedown?
So my only question to that would be, do you want our costs or what it would cost commercial?
What would you as an entity charge to do this sort of work? Okay, we're kind of in the middle of that because what you're saying is different from, you know, because you have equipment to deal with, you have everything else, so all of that must be figured into your costs as you're doing a football game or a basketball game or a school graduation or whatever.
Right, and
Okay.
so the reason why I asked that is because for us, it's a lower cost because we do so many other things. We already have the equipment. We're not paying, a commercial rate for bodies to do the productions.
Right, but at the
Um,
same time also, you would have to plan ahead for replacement or,
Yes,
all right, so all of that has to be figured into how you structure the costs, and you'll see in this why that's important.
yeah,
Okay. Had a discussion recently, just to kind of put things into perspective. When WCAT, for instance, does town meeting, we never know going in to a town meeting how many sessions we're all going to be sitting there, right? And I think I'm the only one, although Brian might be too, who remembers a session back before, it was in the late 80s or early 90s. We started annual town meeting the first Monday in April, and we finally finished town meeting the last Thursday before the 4th of July.
I remember 5 days. I don't know if it was that one. We came here in 1990.
Okay, so it was probably the late 80s, but we started at the beginning of April and we went till the last Thursday, twice a week until budget alone was 3.5 weeks. So in a commercial setup, if you had a production company come in, they would literally have to hold that whole gear for that time. So you wouldn't be paying just for the night's town meeting is in session. You'd have to be paying for all the nights because they couldn't rent that equipment out in the meantime, not knowing how long they'd have to do it. Whereas with WCAT, it's night by night by night. So, okay. Anything else?
Yeah, I would just say, in terms of thinking about, writing something up that says, here's what it would cost as.
Yeah.
It seems to me there, it should be, because you're not that. So to say, like you say, you're not paying commercial rent, you're not paying top
Right.
rent for outside people. So I would say just, it's more based on, to me, on what segment of your budget is it that you are
Yeah.
committing to this,
Yeah,
not so much,
absolutely.
not so much if I was an outside person with a much higher overhead, it would be.
Well, that's why I
higher,
was
so-
making the point that the two are not
Right,
synonymous.
I just
okay?
say, I would be careful in that regard.
Yeah.
Because it sounded to me like you were saying, what would you charge if?
No, because it's two different entities. And
Right.
that's the point I was trying to
It's in apples and oranges.
Yeah, what they do, they can set their equipment aside for each night.
Right.
Okay, whereas if you're dealing with a professional organization, they're gonna have to set it aside until it's done.
Right.
And who knows how long that can be, so, and I was trying to illustrate the difference, not, sorry if there was any confusion there.
Maybe just in my mind.
Okay, Paul?
So I agree with you, Mike, as far as recognizing that there are certain costs that we're incurring.
Yeah.
Out of our dwindling budget, which we're doing because we feel it adds value to the town and the community. Our bylaws say that we are required to cover a town meeting, town council, and school committee meetings.
Yes.
And so I'm glad that you're thinking along these lines, because I was thinking along these lines also.
Yeah.
And so, there are certain things like the graduation, the Veterans Day ceremony, the Memorial Day ceremony. Other things that we feel it's important for us to broadcast.
Yeah.
We feel it's important for us to be there, incurring our costs to provide this service to people in the community, people who are shut in.
Right.
And it's not an obligation that we have. It's something we want to do, but it's not an obligation that we have.
Well, is it?
It's not,
Hasn't it become an obligation because,
there's nothing contractually that says we need to do that.
no, I understand
Okay.
that, but where the environment has changed is that the high school used to have a thriving program, okay, for media. And there was a time when the graduates from that program were as much as a half a year ahead of everyone else at Fitchburg or Emerson or wherever they want to go for college in the same subject. That isn't the case anymore. They also used to cover all of the sports. They used to cover all of the school stuff, which went on the school channel. That's not the case anymore. WCAT is now doing that work
On the public channel, right?
on the public channel.
Okay, so that's the
Okay.
key point.
So,
It's not a public channel obligation. We picked it up. I guess really where I'm going with this is the following. I think it's ultimately, we're going to be in a situation where our ability to generate enough revenue on our own through alternative sources and the declining franchise fees are going to put the economic strain on this business that we're here to talk about and forecast.
right. And that's kind of the reason why I put this together.
And that's the way I'm glad you put it together that way. The way I'm thinking about it is there a possibility that we could consider being willing to continue to provide these community value add services for Veterans Day, Memorial Day, graduation, all the things that the town has come to enjoy as a line item in perhaps a town budget for publicity services for community benefit, maybe even in the town administrator's budget, that might be something along the lines of $50,000 for the year. And if it's needed,
Yeah.
because we aren't able to break even, we can justify that that is money that the town feels is important to spend to provide this service to the community.
Okay, well, hold that idea. Let's hold that until we do the discussion at the next meeting. And I would suggest that we have a meeting a month from now. I'd like to see if we can come to some sort of wrap by the time Steve leaves office.
I think that's a fantastic idea.
Okay, so I would suggest that we plan monthly meetings from now until.
In May.
Right. Monthly meetings from now until Steve
I don't know if we need
departs
monthly
the
meetings,
office.
but I think we need a meeting that focuses in on this issue, because it seems to me that we are gonna need some funding. This looks like it might be a little onerous from an administrative point of view, but we're getting to the same point. We need to consider ways, things that we may be able to implement.
Yeah.
That will address the ultimate need that we were brought here to address.
All right, well then, yeah, go ahead.
So I just wanted to say that, with regards to the high school's program, they have significantly changed their focus, which I think really the element to that is forced, not forced, but that we have picked up. It used to be that that program was very much focused on actual production, field production, and going to events and covering them. Now they focus much more on social media video, on editing, on cinematographic type video, things that, while important for the student, don't help in the situation of covering events for the town. And that's their choice to do that. And they have a very good program for that. Doesn't help us with this, which is why WCAT felt it
But
necessary.
it also
for us
doesn't
to
help
pick
with the
them.
fact that they have a channel that they are obligated to
They are doing
Popular.
what they're doing with that channel, and I have no opinion in any of that. They are putting stuff on it, and that's that. They have no argument for what they're doing.
Okay,
But what I just want to make clear is that WCAT saw the need for the residents to be able to see a basketball game, see a
Mhm.
football game, coverage of a event like we're doing tomorrow night about the late school start.
Mhm.
We don't want to be forced to say no because I don't have the hours in my schedule to cover those things. I think that's wrong.
Mhm.
I would do everything I can to find that. This whole practice that we are doing is to make that still possible.
Mhm.
We want to keep doing this stuff. We want to keep giving to the community and offering everything that we do. And working with others. I would love to have more of a relationship with the high school program, bringing their kids over to do field production for some of them that may want to do that. Which is why we started our internship program. And it has been going very well. We have 4 very dedicated kids that are doing this and learning this work.
So we're giving them an opportunity to advance their skills.
Yes.
We're paying them for this opportunity to advance their skills.
Yes, because they are
And
doing it
we're receiving we're
extracurricular.
receiving the services. And we're paying for the service.
Because we're doing it extracurricular, it's not within school time. And I don't want to see a student have to choose between getting a part-time job at McDonald's or being able to learn something they're going to use in a career. I think that's right. I think they should be able to put those two together to get what they need to be able to be a better person at their chosen profession.
I'd just like to add quickly to that too, that, you know, if we decide not to do sports, or we decide not to do the job and moving on or graduation, it's not gonna be, well, you know, it was tough for them, it's that WCAT walked away. And that's not an image we want to put out.
No.
And that's why I think Ian's right, you know, we're trying to do these things. Yeah, the school could do sports and they could do graduation, they could do gala and moving on, but they're not. But people
Right.
don't know that. What they're gonna know is that WCAT isn't doing it, they quit.
Right.
You know, we don't want that.
And
But
that's
we're not-
precisely why I
Right.
put this together, so that would
Right.
not happen. You know,
So thank you.
so WCAT needs to remain as a media force here in town. Period. Now, how do we make that happen? And hopefully we can discuss that at the next meeting. Okay,
If
Um,
attached to that,
go ahead.
to Paul's suggestion.
Yeah.
It would be nice to know again, what are the extra costs?
Well,
for
and
these
that's all
events?
covered
I
in
mean,
this.
it is in there because I glanced at it. That would be kind of what we need to
Yeah.
look at. I think in your annual report looks at it, what Mike was saying. It's commercially, this is the value you get, and I get that. It's up here.
Yeah.
But what are the extra
Yeah.
costs?
Yes, I will
That
absolutely
would be
put that
helpful.
together.
Okay,
But from an economic point of view, I just want to reemphasize that
Right? Understand.
by fiscal 20, you know, even fiscal 28 or 29, we're not going to be in a position where we need the help.
and that's the other reason for this is it's got to come from somewhere. And the example that I've used in discussions with Brian and with Ian is WCAT, for all intents and purposes, is no different than WGBH. They are both 501c3s in the production realm. The difference is in scale, the difference is in outgoing product. But for all intents and purposes, they are no different. And so, and I remember when WGBH was NET Boston. And they would roll the TV into our classroom and we would see a half an hour program, then they'd roll it out again. It wasn't what it is today. But we're seeing access television across the country diminishing and failing because the model that created it back in the late 70s no longer exists or is quickly dying off because of changes within the industry itself. Okay, nobody saw streaming. Nobody saw some of the other things that are out there, social media or anything else. And all of that has sloughed off what was the audience to community access for 3 decades, give or take. You know,
Well, I
So-
think we want to make it clear that what is being lost is the accounting for that, because the activities are still there.
Yeah.
It's just they're now essentially getting it for free.
I'm sorry,
Who's
who's
getting
getting
what
what
for
for free?
So viewers, when it was just cable, were essentially paying for us because that was the franchise fee is. Now, people who watch our meetings on Facebook, watch a sporting event on YouTube, are getting that same product, but they're not paying for it.
they're not contributing to further production.
There's no
Right.
franchise fee in that regard.
I would just say my only concern is that, and I know you guys don't think this is premature, but I could see someone looking at the situation we're in where we're not exactly sure how much it's gonna cost to
Mhm.
go to the new high school. So look at the balance sheet and say, gee, I see some assets there. The eyebrows going.
Yeah.
And I could see it as being, getting to the council and then having a lot of questions like, are we really there yet? Do we really have to do that kind of formal agreement yet? Or should we wait until, it's not until someone's on their deathbed, but until it looks like numbers have declined. Looks like we know what the cost is to go to the high school.
Yeah.
I'm not making the argument, but
Yeah,
it's gonna be
No.
out there.
and I see what you're saying, Mike, and I.
I've been through too many of those meetings.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
People,
Absolutely.
They all have opinions.
But to be fair, from my point of view, isn't it better to plan ahead before it happens? Because once it happens, everyone's in panic mode and things get overlooked and things get done sloppy.
As one of my financial planner friends says, no one plans to fail, they just fail to plan.
And
I get it, but
yeah,
I am wondering about the fact that we're doing okay. Yeah, and I get the future potential fallout.
Sure. I mean, my thought was, let's go back to that insurance policy concept. We'll back you up.
Yeah.
If you need to be backed up.
right.
And
And I think what you said there about the, bucket of money, if needed,
Mhm.
concept is something that might be, doable in the short term and then perhaps,
Mhm.
unless everybody wants all these meetings not to be published anymore. I don't think that's what people want. And they're not only to say that you walked away, we'll get the calls. Well, no, I won't. It's someone will get those calls.
Somebody
And
after July
often
3rd
very
is going to
friendly,
get called,
friendly.
yes.
Yeah, it won't be that quick.
I
think we look good for.
I would like to hope that we can present a final report to the town by June. That would be my goal.
Yeah.
Because, and, what happens after that? Because I see our, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, everyone, but I see our ultimate, outcome that we're supposed to produce is how do we ensure that it continues and the town still benefits? And hopefully I've tried to balance that in here. But if we can come up with something, present it to the town. And then, I think we have fulfilled what our brief was to do with this committee. But at the same time, also, I don't think we need to take another year to do it. I think we can finish this up by June and present it to the town and move on to the next step. Does anyone disagree?
No, and to that end, I would say that, based on Ian's gonna put some numbers together.
Yeah.
And the fact that, maybe we'll have some answers or some direction or something, on the streaming bill, if, I think the
I'm
leadership.
hoping to have it by, if not Easter, immediately after.
Oh, I would be hoping earlier than that.
It
I would
depends,
just,
it depends on what happens in the legislature, because,
Well, I think at least we can get in and talk to the new speaker.
Yep.
Who we think is gonna be, and maybe the Senate president.
Yep.
So that I would say, long way of getting to the point where I think maybe March 19th would be a good date for the next meeting.
Well, we meet in February
I don't think
and
we,
talk
I
this
don't think,
over.
I don't see the need for it personally.
Okay.
That's just my
Anyone
opinion.
else?
One of
March 19th is good by me.
March 19th. I'm already booked that day to be here anyway, so.
All right.
It's, oh,
6 again, correct, right?
Yeah. Okay, so the next meeting will be March 19th. Steve, I will send a copy of this as a PDF to Sherry,
And then we can. put it
so
in.
she can put it in,
Yeah.
all right? And, all right, anyone else, comments, questions,
All good.
all good? Okay, well, thank you very much. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second, all in favor? Opposed? We're done. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.